Webb takes a knee. The clock will do the rest.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another Cougs on the Couch edition this week, sponsored by CougFan.com. It's going to be Jackson and myself today. Dylan had some technical issues. StreamYard's giving him a little grief, so he'll be on the next one. But yeah, it's going to be, we're going to have a relatively short episode today, kind of talking about just some opinion subjects. There's not much news to go over today, but also be on the lookout, and we'll get into this later on. But we're going to be having on the WSU general manager, Ricky Saccone, today at 1 o'clock. So that video will be posted later today. Also tomorrow, we're going to be having on WSU transfer quarterback, Johnny. I'm blanking on his name right now.
Johnny Shepard.
Johnny Shepard. Yes. Thank you. So yeah, be on the lookout for those. But before we get into it, if you or someone you know is thinking of buying, selling, or refinancing on the West Coast, reach out to myself for your mortgage. And also check out CougFan.com for all things Cougar athletics. And Jackson, where can they find you?
They can find me on all socials, pretty much, more or less. Jackson M. Gardner. Go get your mortgage with Connor, please, and thank you. Always happy to support the team here.
So the first topic we're going to cover today is some WSU football, and it's an opinion piece. Barstool Wazoo actually tweeted out saying, you can add any all-time WSU football player in their prime to the team right now. What player are you picking? Jackson, who are you taking?
I've been thinking about this question all week. All week. I don't know. Sometimes I just come across something on Twitter that is like, just some classic WSU late May, Twitter, fodder. And I'm thinking about it all week. And I don't, before we even get to who we decided, Connor, I'm curious how you even really approached this. Did you think about this specifically within 2025 team needs, positional needs, or were you more all time, just best available, or sort of nostalgia based? Where was your head at with this?
So I really have three. At the end of the day, It's some of the best players from the Leach era. And it also does play into the positional needs for Washington State this coming season. And that's why I wanted to go last, because it's like I could go with any of these, and there's different reasons onto why. Some are because, hey, if you have this guy here, he's just going to make this side of the ball, that much more solid. Or it's because, hey, there's a potential weakness in this other area. So there's different routes that I can go on this, and we could talk about multiple players each. But sure. I guess with that,
I have two.
Okay.
And similarly, one I think was very obvious, and then the other is a deep cut that I'm not even really sure about. But it's sort of like we're going to sort of workshop it live, and we'll see how it plays. But so I did approach it by 2025 positional need. And I mean, I think you gotta, for me, thinking GM wise, I want to build a roster with premium positions. And the most glaring need right now is a quarterback. So I'm assuming you had at least a quarterback in there to add on to the roster. No quarterback.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
For me, it's we have these guys that we don't know too much about. I mean, we have Zebby. He's shown what he can do. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of these guys have been 1-2 year guys. Like Cam Ward came through, John Mateer, obviously. They're dual threat guys. They're super high talent. Right. I'm not worried about the quarterback position, to be honest, whether it's Zebby, whether it's one of these other transfer guys, whether it's a combination. That's not a position to where I'm really worried about. And so that's my thought process. It's we don't necessarily need Gardner Minshew if we could add someone else that's elite at another position.
Okay. And I think that's an interesting thought, and a one to put a pin in late May, because that's one that we might be revisiting later when the season starts. That quarterback is not a position of need for WSU. Connor Webb, write his name on it. That's his take. Okay, so I pretty much came from the exact opposite point of view. I think the quarterback position is a huge question mark. And I mean, I think the competition at the quarterback position is indicative of that, particularly that guys who really haven't had any meaningful playing time or fully in this battle. So there really isn't a quarterback
That's
that I
fair.
think stands out with experience. And so that's where I started. And I was going through all the years, like, God, what quarterback is perfect for this new scheme? And the answer was right under my nose the entire time. And I spent all week thinking about this. And yesterday, I was like, Jackson, what were you thinking? The obvious answer, you don't need to go back 20 years, 10 years. You don't even need to go back 5. You don't even need to go back. You only need to go back 1 full year. The answer is John Mateer, all-time leading rushing quarterback for WSU in his lone season. That stat kind of blew me away. I thought he was like single season leader, career leading rusher at quarterback for WSU, which is kind of a testament to how many pocket passers WSU has produced. But I think John Mateer is perfect for the new offense. Maybe not as powerful of a runner, but certainly is dynamic enough where you're like, okay, this guy, like, we saw it last year. We saw what he can do. We know what his game is and how shifty and dynamic he can be. So I think him in the new offense, like, that would have been the most ideal scenario. Not a hot take, I don't think.
I mean, hey, if you could have a top 5 Heisman candidate on your team, then yes, I will take that. But it's like,
right,
out of the potential positional needs, obviously having John Mateer on your roster would
might be a little bit of a boring answer for the question, considering it's only a year ago. But I think when you really think about it, like, what this offense is looking for, what they need, God, a guy like John Mateer, and that back half of the season, and I don't think we really talked about this enough, but how much he improved as a thrower of the football. And I said this, I believe we did a Twitter space about this many months ago. John Mateer earned his $3 million at the back half of the year when he showed that he could throw the football at a more consistent rate, more accurately. I think that's where he really got paid. Not obviously the running is great, but now that we saw him that he can do both, and we feel a little bit more comfortable about that, I think John Mateer is the correct answer. Now I have another answer, and this one's a deeper cut, and this one requires a little more thought. And honestly, I would like to interview this person to ask him how he would feel about it before I actually picked him. But my second quarterback that I chose, Jack Thompson, the throwing Samoan. And here's why. Here's why. Obviously, I never watched Jack Thompson play at WSU, in the NFL. That's not my relation. I've always known Jack Thompson as sort of the grandfather of WSU football. However, I was going back in preparation for this question and looking up some things, and like, good grief, you look at the guy when he was in college. I mean, a chiseled 6'2", 235. And he was never, deployed as a runner. It was a very sort of West Coast offense that they were running. That might not even be accurate. I don't know why I said that it was a West Coast offense, but from the clips that I was watching, it definitely appeared that way. And I sort of thought to myself, like, what if he would have been used more as a dual threat quarterback? What if that would have been a little more in vogue? And I mean, I guess there were certainly plenty of triple option offenses like that in the 70s. But had he been used more as a runner, would that have worked? I think he could have fit a little bit more of the power, the power quarterback run. And there are, if you can find clips of him running, which I found one in the NFL, the guy can move. So the question I wanted to ask Jack is, A, if you were in an offense that was, a little more run heavy, do you think you could have done that? And B, what was your 40 time? Because there is no record of Jack Thompson's 40 time on the internet. And I would just be curious to know what the dude was running in his day, in addition to using that as a reference point for my pick. What do you think, Jack Thompson?
So, yeah, I mean, I need to look at his obviously he's the throwing Samoan. He's got that nickname for a reason. He's got some talent there.
The throwing Samoan, not the running Samoan, the throwing Samoan. Right. That's a key point there.
So
And
you
if
went
you
with
do
two
go
quarterbacks.
yes, 2 quarterbacks. I think quarterback, you in year one with a new coach, like having familiarity, having someone that you're comfortable with behind center is probably the most. I mean, it's the most important position in football. So regardless of whether it's a first year coach, you want to have a quarterback you feel great with. Um, but I just think for how important it is to get Jimmy Rogers' tenure off to the right start, and we talked about it last year, like, God, if they can get to 6 or 7 wins, like that's such a big deal for the program. And not to say, 5 wins, but anything below 6 feels tough and it is not fun, but like it's really actually not as bad as, a lot of fans probably would think it is. So I just think having a quarterback that you really feel comfortable with helps you get to that 6-win mark and win the games that you should win, and then helps you stay competitive in some of the ones that are a little bit more of a coin flip.
So I guess my reasoning in asking on the quarterback is because like we saw Cam Ward, he was an unknown. He got recruited to WSU. He had 2 stellar years. Transfers to Miami. Is one of the best players in the country. Drafted number 1 overall. John Mateer, same story, out of Texas. No one knew about him. He comes to WSU, unproven. First year, he pops off. He's in he should be in the Heisman conversation. If WSU
Definitely
wins the games that they should have, he's in the national talk. What's to say that the same type of thing can't happen a third time? To where,
but you're totally right. You're totally right.
It's a Johnny Shepard. Yeah.
This is the fallacy of that too, is you have this good thing that keeps happening, and then you just sort of say to yourself, well, surely it will happen to Zevi. Surely it will happen to Ajani. Like, surely it will happen to Duger. We don't know that. That's not always going to be the case. Oh my goodness. Speak of the devil. We got Dylan on the hook, bringing the fire to this week's episode.
Pissed off this morning. It's not even funny.
And we need
Dylan,
that energy.
What are your hot takes? We need a hot take right now.
We need a hot take right off the bat. Fire something. Give us something, Dylan.
Well, my Nationals are apparently going to trade Nate Lau.
Isn't he on a 1-year deal or something like that? Did you not expect them to sell off?
Nationals talk right off the bat. I'm loving it. This man is fired up. Dylan, we're in the question of if you had to choose any player from WSU all time to add to the team, this year's team, through the fire of your rage, what is your answer off top?
I'm just happy that I was able to make this conversation still, because my roommate's still asleep and he's probably not asleep anymore after what I was doing out here. So,
okay.
Jackson went with 2 quarterbacks.
So I went with 2 quarterbacks, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on both. First one, kind of a boring answer, but I think the right answer. John Mateer, all-time WSU leading rushing quarterback, I would think fits this new offense as a dual threat quarterback. And we absolutely know what we have with John Mateer, particularly what we saw with him throw as a passer sort of in the back half of the year and as a runner in the front half of the year. We really know what we have with him. That is sort of the reliability that this team really could have used, particularly him being on the team last year, like a presence of leadership being on this year's team for Jimmy Rogers' first year. That's answer number 1. What do you think?
Yeah. Honestly, I think that's a pretty good name right out of the hat. And sorry, I think I've got some audio issues. I apologize.
No, you sound great.
Perfect. I can hear you guys now. I had 2 names in my hat initially, and it was Ryan Leaf and Abraham Lucas. But I didn't even like pay attention to John Mateer, because John and Mateer are no longer in my vocabulary. So that's why I didn't think about it. But gosh, Jackson, honestly, that is the perfect fit for the team.
I was telling Connor this. But big but. What do we got?
But if you give me redshirt freshman year Abraham Lucas, okay, he's already got 1 year in the program. He's got one fall camp under his belt, one spring camp under his belt. I'm leaning Abraham Lucas just because I want a staple bell cow on my offensive line, and I'm going to trust that we're going to be able to find a quarterback that's going to fit this system, but I want to make sure my quarterback's healthy.
Okay, so we were actually just discussing this, and Connor had mentioned sort of a similar point that you were sort of alluding to, is that we did it with Cam Ward, we did it with John Mateer, two relatively unknown guys. What's to say it's not going to happen this year? And my point was, who's to say it won't? Who's to say it will, though? It's kind of the fallacy of having that happen to you, is that you sort of just expect the next quarterback to just like, well, relatively unknown guy can be a fringe Heisman guy now. Like, that's not
this is QBU.
That is not a realistic expectation, which is why my head immediately went firm up the quarterback. But that's interesting, and I'm really excited to get to Connor's pick because he said he didn't have a quarterback either. And it sounds like you both are of a similar position, that you are not particularly concerned about the quarterback position for WSU, at least right now. In late May. Continue, Connor.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you could add the best player that you can think of from WSU history to any position, it's like, where can you have the most impact? Of course, quarterback is a very impactful position. If you could have John Mateer, I would take that. But it's like, if you could add, as he mentioned, Abraham Lucas, one of my guys is Andre Dillard, lineman. Because if you add a guy like that, similar to Abe Lucas, that fixes so many potential issues that you could have on the offensive side of the ball. And it's one of those prime positions to where if you could block for your quarterback, give him more time. Like, I trust the recruiting and the scouting and Zevi Eckhouse, all these guys that they're bringing in. They're going to find someone that's going to be able to manage the game, throw the ball well, maybe run the ball a little bit. And with this new more balanced offense, it's not the air raid to where they're 100% relying on throwing the ball. You can hand it off. You can do a lot of different things. So that's where it's like, I don't think QB is the biggest need. So Andre Dillard is one of mine. The other one is on the defensive side of the ball. It's Deion Buchanan. And that's because last year, WSU had one of the worst defenses in the country. It was atrocious to watch. And if you have Deion, that's a safety rovering up there with Tucker Large this year. He just has such a big impact on the defensive side. So it's like, defense wins championships. If we could take this defense from one of the worst in the country to one of the best, have a solid guy like that could just be patrolling the secondary and also, making those big hits on the running back when you need them. I think those two guys and those two positions would be a bigger need currently than a quarterback, because I mean, I liked what I saw from Zevi, a Johnny, these other guys, I'm sure they have a lot of potential and they'll find ways to use them in ways that benefit the team. But if you could take one of these other guys, I would.
I think so. I like to touch on Buchanan a little bit because that's an interesting thought, and I to a degree I agree with you that having someone great in the secondary. However, Buchanan's an interesting one because from what I remember of Buchanan, sort of hybrid, can step in, play a little bit of linebacker too. Maybe a safety that was sort of more of a pure center fielder, if you will, kind of. And I'm trying to think of who that would have been,
Jaden Hicks.
Yeah, a little bit, but I guess Shalom Luani had that one season where he had like 7 or 6 interceptions or something like that. But even then, I think he was still more of like a Buchanan sort of step into the box, like you can move him around a little bit more. But remember
Shalom Luani was just the man back in the day.
Unbelievable.
He was
unbelievable. I can't remember. What was that? Was that 16 or 17 that he just absolutely erupted? I can't remember.
I believe it was either 15 or 16, because then I think he ended up getting drafted late in the 6th or 7th round by the Raiders and was kind of out of football. But my question to you would be to throw this back on you, Jackson. If you had to pick one of these two defenders, are you taking Hercules Mataafa or are you taking Frankie Lulu? They're different. They're different players, but but both can rush the passer. I think Frankie might give
Right.
you a little bit more on both sides of the foot, like defending the run as well as getting after the passer.
Yeah, a little. So the interesting thing now is the premise of the question is in their prime at WSU, because I think what's so remarkable about Frankie Louvu is how he's grown as a player in his time in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like when he was at WSU, he was a firm edge rusher. That's what he was used to. Like he was not stepping back as an inside linebacker, and if he did, it was sparingly. Now at in Washington, he's all over the place, and it's really cool to see him be used like that. But that's not who he was at WSU. And I guess the second part of that question that fits into my equation is that there's really no one on WSU's defensive line, whether you're interior guy or an outside guy, that is really that proven. So it's not like, oh, I already have an edge rusher. I can take Kirk to get him in the interior, or I already have a guy in the interior. I can go with Louvu. So I think you're really trying to just firm up the line. And I think probably the answer is Herc, because you want the 3-tech. You want a defensive lineman who can create havoc, who gets those one-on-ones because he's playing a 3 technique and is causing pressure up the middle. But that is a tough question because that edge rusher is a premium position, and having a guy you can reliably get 6 to 9 sacks is really big. Yeah, you hope for 10. In college is it's difficult with only playing 12 games, but yeah, if you can get.
So I think you're going Hercules.
Yeah,
You'd go Hercules.
I think I'm going Herc.
Okay.
Yeah. Connor, you had one more though, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So I took Andre Dillard and Deion Buchanan.
Andre Dillard, Deion Buchanan, and then who was?
Depending on what your guys' answers were going to be, I was also going to say Gabe Marks. Because if you were to add a wide receiver that can be added on top of what we have in Devin Ellison, Josh Meredith, there's no like big third guy necessarily. If you could add a 1 to that lineup, you have one of the best receiving cores. I mean, obviously in the Pac-12 this year.
Yeah.
And that just increases the ceiling of what your offense can be.
And the attitude that he bring, just like you love that kind of guy in a receiver's room leading that kind of group. That's a good shout right there.
Last one for me. And this is a deep cut, especially with this offense. Now, granted, we have a lot of running backs already.
I was thinking that also.
I'm fairly certain we're strong there. Jerome Harrison.
Harrison. Okay. I thought Ruben Mays was coming, and that was a very popular pick in sort of the comments of the tweet with Jerome Harrison. A little more of our age range, probably have a little more familiarity with him for sure.
I thought of Borgie for a second, to be honest.
Yeah. Borgie would be cool, especially imagine him and Voorhees in the backfield. Woo!
They're like the same. I mean, very similar guys. Styles.
Yeah, that's an interesting show. Guys, before we get to the next topic, I did something before we hopped on, just sort of, a late May topic to discuss. I hopped on ChatGPT and asked them, how many games will WSU win in 2025 in the regular season? And I'm curious, do you guys think that before you guess how many games you think ChatGPT guessed, do you think they were optimistic about WSU or skeptical?
I would say skeptical.
I think they were optimistic.
Okay. Yeah. I
think ChatGPT is going to take, all this info from back-to-back national championships at SDSU, granted, jumping up a level, but I'm gonna lean into the optimism.
Dylan, you were right. At least in my opinion, I thought ChatGPT was quite optimistic. And I'll say it. ChatGPT had us at 7 wins. And I think that's reasonably optimistic. And I guess that brings to a second point is, Connor, you and I talked about this a little bit last week, but the expectations of what this season will look like. And I think there's like a large range of expectations. So that's why I kind of categorize it as like, what does great look like what does sort of good, okay look like? What does bad look like? And then what is an absolute disaster? And for me,
yeah.
oh yeah. Sorry. No. Continue.
No, it's all you.
Okay. For me, I like my great is where at like Chat GPT is at like 7-8 wins, I think is great for year one. My good okay is 6 wins or 5 wins with an Apple Cup win. My bad, similarly, either 4 wins with an Apple Cup win is bad, and then complete disaster is 3 wins or less.
And
are you
no
guys on a
Apple
similar
Cup.
And no Apple Cup win? No Apple Cup win. Are you guys on a similar page, or are a little more optimistic, a little more pessimistic? Where are you at?
I mean, I think a solid win where it's like we got to get to 6 wins. We got to get to a bowl game. That's ideal.
Mhm.
And I think anything less than that would be a disappointment to me.
Okay.
If we get more than that, then I
would put it specifically. So you're at good would be 6 wins. Good to okay.
For first year, all these changes, everything that's going on, I think 6 wins would be good.
Okay.
Less
and
than
then are
that,
you saying bad is 5 wins either way you slice it? Or is
like
that
we talked about last
disaster?
week, it depends on how it looks also. If you're losing
Sure.
close games, I mean, there's the Ole Miss game, there's the Virginia game that's on the East Coast, some of those.
Virginia's also not very good either.
Okay.
Guys.
Right.
Well,
but it's still,
if you're getting throttled
across the country. Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on if you're getting throttled or if it's close games. So I think there's a lot of variables, but
okay,
you got to win 6 games in my opinion.
Okay. So I guess the better question is at what point does it become a disaster? What is the total number of wins where we're in
4 wins,
disaster?
no Apple Cup. That's disaster.
Yeah. Cup for you. 4 wins, no Apple Cup.
And
disaster.
honestly, I think I would even consider good. And again, I guess it tables off of what are the scores of these games. Because if I get 5 wins and an Apple Cup victory, I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling pretty good, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm okay. So it really does not sound like we are very far apart. We're within the margins of a win. I think a
great season.
Us, really.
I think a great season is 9 wins.
You guys?
9 wins.
Okay. So we're talking wins against Idaho, San Diego State. You're essentially sweeping the games that you feel like you absolutely have to get, which would be Idaho, yes, San Diego State, North Texas, Toledo, Virginia Tech, Virginia, Oregon State.
James Madison.
I'm
winning both games back east. James Madison and Virginia, and I'm okay with an L at Ole Miss. If you can go 2-1 in those East Coast games, I think they give them a pretty good shot at winning 8 games this year if they can win 2 out of those 3 East Coast games.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I'm there, and then split with
realistically, split with OSU, which is going to be tough. And realistically, like when we look at Washington, what they're bringing in, I mean, didn't your brother go to UW, Jackson?
Yes, he did. Yeah, 2015 to 2019.
So do you have a little bit of a little bit of a read on where they're at as a roster this year? Because I'll be honest with you, taking a look last year, am I wrong here? If they would have sat Will Rogers after the first quarter, do we win that Apple Cup?
Oh, no. And I think the only thing, the only thing that I really have to say about the University of Washington, I do not follow them that close. I mean, box score stuff, I'm sure, that's pretty common amongst.
The only reason I said that is because your brother. I'm not here to.
Right. No. I will say the Williams, the quarterback, scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
Scares the absolute hell out of me.
Oh, yeah.
And particularly because of that you can only imagine that guy sitting on the sideline just thinking, why the hell am I not in this game right now? Why am I all season he's thinking, why the hell am I not playing right now? And I mean, you got to imagine on the road in Pullman, he is going to be jazzed up for that game. So yeah, no, I am totally secure in myself with saying I am horribly frightened of Desmond Williams. Is it Desmond or what?
I think it's Demond.
DeMond Williams.
DeMond Williams. Yeah. So I am horrified of him. And I think many should be, because he looks like a hell of a quarterback, but we'll see. Okay, wait,
Yeah.
Connor. I wanted to get your thought too. So Dylan was at 9 wins would be great. Are you there as well?
If we're 8 wins or plus, that would be great,
Okay.
in my opinion. Like 6 wins
Throw
is
up the
goal.
schedule again.
If you get
Por
more than
favor.
6 wins, then okay, we're getting into good territory. We're solid. We met the base mark that we're hoping for. If you get to 8, so yeah, Idaho, San Diego State, North Texas, we take the Apple Cup. And then last week we said that we lose at Colorado State, and then you lose at Ole Miss. And
Colorado
then Toledo's
State's
at
got
home.
a good amount of their team returning. That quarterback returns. That's
Toledo's
not
at
going to
home,
be
Louisiana
an
Tech's at
easy
home.
game. Yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah,
I mean,
I think 8+ is definitely very plausible.
sure.
And
Yeah.
getting above 7 would be, getting above 7-8 would be great in my opinion.
Okay, so I think that's an interesting sort of benchmark for all of us, and I'd be curious to hear from listeners. Who do you think is most on base right here? With me at 7+ is great, Connor at 8+ is great, and then Dylan at 9. 9+. I'll say 9.
Yeah.
Would be great. I'm curious to think who or what you guys, you the listener, thinks is most on, and also with the previous topic we had, whose pick of the all-time WSU player to join this roster is the best selection for this team.
Let us know. Drop a comment in terms of where we're right, where we're wrong.
I'm sure we could throw together a little Twitter poll maybe after the show to get that information. That might be fun.
And I think if I'm just going to generalize the WSU fan, I think a great season for the generalized WSU fan is bowl eligible and you win the Apple Cup.
Yeah, I would take that.
And that's pretty simple.
Yeah. And I think that's good. But I don't know, because I think particularly after the Leach era and relative success after the post Leach era, people still have WSU fans still have very high expectations for WSU football. The read I get is always above 6 wins, but expectations for some can creep up to 7-ish wins. And I think that's crazy to expect that of WSU when you really try and approach it from an objective point of view. But that is a result of the success that WSU has had, is that a lot of fans expect around 7 wins, to deem it as a season worth tuning into.
Because really, who are the real tough matchups,
The tough matchups. Okay, let's start off. I'm going to say North Texas is going to be a tough matchup. It's their first road football game for this team. Then you come back home, rivalry game, Washington, back-to-back tough matchups. Now we're back-to-back with Colorado State. Wait, sorry, but wait, there's more.
Yeah.
Mississippi, Virginia. I mean, you're getting 5 straight tough matchups. Then you get Toledo at home, Oregon State, Louisiana Tech, and James Madison.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, I think Louisiana Tech, Toledo, Idaho, and San Diego State are your 4 gimmies that you got to get.
Sure.
And then in your second tier, will go, I'd say North Texas, Colorado State, Virginia. They're all road games. Yeah. And I'd put the home game for Oregon State in that. And then, your toughest tier, your third tier, I guess, is just, your gimme wins. The Louisiana, your gimmies. So
I'm glad your head went there, because that's where my head went to as well, in sort of tiering the opponents as Washington, Mississippi, and for me, away at Oregon State are the tier 1 difficult opponents. Tier 2 is what you just mentioned, North Texas, away at North Texas, away at Colorado State, at home against Oregon State, and I'll throw at James Madison as well as the tier 2. And then excuse me, I forgot Virginia. I'm throwing Virginia in there as a tier 2 difficult opponent. And then the rest are at home, G5 and below. You got to win those.
I tell you what, if this team starts off 3-0 and then you win an Apple Cup, and all of a sudden you've got last year all over again. I mean,
totally. You do.
People are going ape shit.
Absolutely. And that's why I think, if you had that, if you start 4-0, is my camera might be.
Yeah, you just have to tap the.
Well,
we'll leave the light on for you.
Oh, apologies, guys. Here, I think. Here, do you guys want to continue this while I get this worked out?
Yeah, it can't be worse than me just trying to type in StreamYard.com for 30 minutes this morning, losing my mind.
Every week there's a tech issue. It's like I'm going to start charging by the hour moving forward. But Dylan, you have a hard out time at 10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock right now. We could just transition. We got a couple interviews coming up. We got the GM of Washington State University football, Ricky Saccone, which we're going to interview this afternoon. Dylan, what are you looking forward to hearing from Ricky?
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to him about just what his day-to-day looks like, what the recruiting aspect looks like, how often he's on the on the recruiting trail. And then I kind of want to ask like the differences of where the WSU GM is as opposed to the North Carolina GM with like Belichick and everybody up there. Cause there's obviously a world of difference in terms of who you're able to recruit, who you're able to attract, whose living rooms you're able to get into. And I'll stick around for another 7 minutes because I did want to get into this topic that Jackson and I had about Cedric Coward. So once he gets back going, we'll talk about that. But there we go.
Yeah, and so
Apologize.
I guess just talking about Ricky real quick. He spent the previous 8 years at the University of Toledo. He was also prior to that, he was the director of player personnel at Louisiana in 24. So yeah, he's been on the East Coast for a bit of his time, and now coming over to Washington State, fresh with Jimmy Rogers and his staff. What that looks like with the transfer portal, all this that's going on, where he feels like the needs might be on the roster.
And to be quite honest, until you brought up that little profile of Ricky, I legitimately thought he came over with South Dakota State. So that's going to be one of my
Everyone
first
else
questions.
came over with them.
Yeah.
Sounds like you got some homework to do before the interview.
Yeah. That's going to be one of my first questions is going to be like, well, how did you get here? How did this materialize with Jimmy Rogers, with you being, at University of Louisiana and, obviously spending time at Toledo? How did this intermix?
I think another great question might be too is, a little bit more of a technical question, but when we think of GMs, we totally think of the NFL style GM of just completely focused on roster construction. But I'd be curious to know, what is really the difference between being a college GM and being, I'm not saying his experience as an NFL GM, but where does that differentiate for him and how he approaches building a college roster? I think that would be pretty fascinating to get his opinion, particularly at a place like WSU, where the turnover is going to be very high and you're going to have to be replacing guys all the time. As I said last week, it just seems now that everyone, it's a 1-year deal plus an option. I'm curious how he approaches roster construction with all that in mind.
Written down. I'm asking him, and I'm saying that was directly from this brain.
By all means, that one's free for you.
Well, one thing I did want to show everybody was I wanted to show everybody's Cedric Coward's career at Duke. It was a fantastic career as a Duke basketball. Woo! Go Blue Devils.
Except Rogers got on the field and put a jersey on.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could say that was That was his career at WSU as well.
Yeah, right.
But to no fault of his own, But I'd say us and Duke are kind of in the same boat.
Yeah. No, I wanted a little bit of a comic relief here, but Jackson, go ahead and break down kind of what this topic is.
Yeah. So, I think people have been noticing and NBA draft people have been talking about Cedric and how he's kind of moving up. And I don't know if this is a consensus opinion. I don't know if I'm just so WSU pilled that all I see on my timeline is pro Cedric Coward. But it sounds like there's a potential for him to be a first round pick, a late first round guy, with what he's been showing sort of through the draft process. And there's been a lot of discussion about, whether people want, and obviously WSU folks want to see him go. And I guess what I have been trying to sort of think through is why we really even care. I mean, I'm curious, do you guys care? Do you guys care whether he gets drafted right now and goes and gets to say, Cedric Coward, Washington State University, or whether he goes to Duke and it's next year and they say Cedric Coward, Duke? Does that matter to you at all?
Dylan, if you
the
want to
only
go
way
first.
it matters to me is that I think it helps David Riley and his staff when they're in a living room with a recruit and their family, and they're like, hey, man, here's who A, B, C, this is what they did. This is where they're at. They were in my program for 3 or 4 years. Hey, I found this guy at the D3 level. I brought him up Eastern to WSU to the draft, or even to Duke to the draft. I still think it works both ways, regardless if he goes to Duke or if he gets drafted out of school. That's the only way I care is that going to help our program bring in other talent? That's the only way it helps me. Other than that, simply because he only played 6 games this year with us, and there was a bitter, for lack of a better term, bitter taste in our mouth. We're 13-3 team. The team was much different with Cedric Coward defensively and offensively speaking. Okay, was this a tournament team? I think they had a shot at it. A definite, making the crown tournament and this and that. But I think they had a shot with Cedric fully healthy. But the fact that you said this too, we also kind of got the Aaron Rodgers flag treatment with Cedric Coward here. We got 6 games with him. Granted, it seemed like he was a consummate teammate. There was multiple times throughout the year you saw him next to Riley at games, almost acting like an extra coach. But I'm kind of getting caught up in a tangent here.
Yeah,
that's where I only care.
Well, I think so. Your main point is that it's used as a recruiting tool, and I agree with you. However, I just think in the new era of college sports, the equation is changed. It's the same equation, but the sort of the factors are different. Now it's not necessarily did this guy get drafted, because that's just a pseudonym for did you get paid? Did this guy get paid? Let's be clear. Cedric Coward is going to get paid regardless of where he goes.
Yes.
I believe a late first round pick, you're making $2 to $3 million annually. I would suspect he would probably fetch 1.5 to 2 in the transfer portal, somewhere around that number, being graded out.
And not to
like
cut you off,
guy.
Real quick, what a lot of these schools are doing, the Texas Techs, the Dukes, your premier blue blood schools right now, and some new blue blood schools in college basketball that we've seen over the last 10 to 15 years, is that they're going, okay, hey, yeah, you could be a second round draft pick and you might get drafted in the second round. Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to offer you about $500,000 more than what you're going to make as a second round draft pick. And you're going to stay in school. You're going to make money, and you have an opportunity to even, climb on that draft board in the next year too. So I just think that where the game is now with NIL is that these blue blood programs are going to start taking talent away from the NBA because they're able to offer so much money and really match what they're going to make, at the NBA level.
Yeah. And so, but I mean, that's really the point that I'm trying to make, is that the recruiting pitch doesn't actually change. Previously, before NIL, the only reason we were touting the number, or anyone touted the number of players that were getting drafted, was because that means our players will get paid eventually. Now you can just pay them immediately. So whether you're going to Duke for $2.5 million, or you're getting drafted in the late first round, early second, and you're making $1.5 million to $2.5 million a year, these guys are getting paid. So to me, the recruiting pitch doesn't change at all. And just as you had mentioned, Cedric Howard only played 6 games for WSU. That's not his fault. Like, I didn't have a bitter taste in my mouth. The guy got hurt. What's he supposed to do?
Yeah. No, I didn't mean it like that.
Yeah. But like, definitely there's a lot of WSU fans that said, damn, what could have been? I think there's definitely a lot of people that thought that WSU could have been a tournament team. But my larger and broader point here is that, okay, in this new landscape of NIL, just because, we don't have to put as much stock in players getting drafted, because there's other ways to get paid. So if that is the case, then why do we care that Cedric Howard, just to hear his name be called with Washington State University on the end of it, despite the fact that, and again, through no fault of his own, this man provided 0 meaningful memories to WSU fans. Like, there was no Cedric Howard game, I remember what Jalen Wells did to Arizona in Tucson on that late January day. I remember that. You cannot take that away from me. You cannot take away what John Mateer did to University of Washington in September, of last year. Like, those are memories that I get to live with for the rest of my life. And now that John Mateer gets paid $3 million to go to Oklahoma, you want me to forget about him and forget those memories that we had and cheer on Cedric Howard, who did not provide me any memories, but because he gets drafted with Washington State, we remember him as a Coug for life. Like, come on, that makes no sense to me. The Cougs for life should be the ones that provided us lifelong memories that we will not forget. And just because you enter the transfer portal does not mean that you did not provide WSU fans with fantastic memories. And so many of them have. Cam Ward, John Mateer, the list goes on of guys, and it's only going to get longer, in the NIL era. But I just think we have our heads are programmed to react to these stories in a pre-NIL mindset that, getting drafted means that we can use it as a recruiting tool. Whereas that's just not the case anymore. It's about getting paid. So I think we should celebrate the players that give us great memories, like a Gardner Minshew did. And obviously he was pre-NIL, but celebrate those guys. And when they get paid, when they reach their point where economic opportunity is waiting for them, and economic opportunity that WSU can't provide, pat them on the back and celebrate them and remember the memories, not be sad that on draft day it says Cam Ward, the University of Miami, not WSU.
One more thought. Does it also help the conference as a whole? I mean, it's like, if you have more guys that are going pro that are tied directly to these universities, does that also help the conference in its stature? And like, Pac-12 is the conference of champions, anything that we can get to have some sort of recognition. Right.
I think you could make that argument, but I still think the equation is the same. Guys that are coming out of the Pac-12, we want to position the new Pac-12 as sort of the rest of the G5. That's what you ideally want the Pac-12 to be, and you can still achieve that by making sure your guys are getting paid handsomely by Power 4 programs, or the NFL, or the NBA, or wherever it may be. But the fact is that these kids, when they're coming to college, their dream is to get paid. And it doesn't really matter whether, obviously all of them want to go pro, but if you can get guys paid through through them transferring, that is still an effective recruiting tool, whether it's NFL or through NIL.
Yeah.
Well, there was a where were you moment for Connor and I with Cedric Coward, and it was the season opener,
Okay.
Portland State. I texted Connor. I said, "Look, man, Vegas doesn't know about Cedric Coward. They've got no
I remember
idea
you tweeting
him.
about this. I remember you tweeting about this.
They've got him at 12 points tonight. Hammer it." I think he dropped like 19, but
Yeah, you should have put your life savings on that, Dylan.
no, that was also a tweet too. I had some inside info on Portland State's team. I guess they played a, like the closed indoor scrimmage against Western Washington like a week prior and gave up like 98 to Western Washington. And I'm like, okay, this is David Riley's first game. Not a lot of defense. The over under was like 150. And I was just subtly just trying to like not say it, but say it. Like, please,
Right.
everyone, I need you to hammer this over under tonight.
Go make some money. I love that. So
but going back to a little bit of a point, I think the reason why we're seeing this is, and it's mostly that we're seeing this on Twitter with WSU fans. Oh, I want to root for Cedric Coward. I want him to be able to have that Washington State University tag. And the reason why I think that is because we have had so many players that should have had that tag eventually go to a new spot. They have a new tag on who, drafted out of Texas Tech or this or that. And people are fans are tribal. They're pissed that they didn't
recognition
they didn't get the recognition. So I think that's why you're seeing this with Cedric Coward, is that it's this brand recognition that they must have, when deep down, you and I can both look at the scenario and look at what happened and go, was he really a Coug? And again, it wasn't his fault. He got hurt, and there's some other aspects. It's like, okay, wow, he got pretty healthy too quick for this NBA combine. Could he have come back? Like, was that an option? So you never know. And obviously a guy like that, he knew that at the end of the season, the light at the end of the tunnel was the NBA draft combine. And he knew he was going there no matter what. This is a guy that wants to be in the NBA probably first here. Duke, hey, great spot to be. Almost made the Final Four. Did they get bounced in the Elite Eight, or did they make the Final Four? Regardless,
they made the Final Four. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, they did make the Final Four, but I mean, when you have Jonathan Giovini tweeting about you regularly, which is happening with Cedric Coward right now, that tells me he's done. He's going to the NBA.
Yeah.
I mean, he's reached a threshold. Who knows? Perhaps he maybe even makes it into the lottery. And there were some more comparisons of Coward to a Kawhi Leonard back in the day when he was coming out of San Diego State. There was some similar hand measurements. Kawhi's are obviously bigger, but Cedric's just a little bit of a freak when it comes down to it, and he can shoot the lights out.
How's Cedric's laugh?
Oh, that's a good question. if he to get the true Kawhi comp, he needs to. We need to hear that laugh. But I think you're totally right, and I'm not rooting for him to go to Duke necessarily. I'm just saying, Cedric, do what's best for you. Like, if you want to go pursue the most amount of money, if you want to go pursue, your dream of playing in the NBA, go do what's best for you. But I certainly am not looking at this as what's the best scenario for WSU, because I don't think it matters. The recruiting pitch it stays the same. And again, Dylan, you're right. You were talking about sort of just like the overwhelming emotions of trying to change your mindset from pre-NIL and what mattered then versus what matters now in the NIL era. And particularly for WSU fans, because we have been hard done by arguably the most among anyone in college sports. It's very difficult for us to sort of get over these emotions, or at least even deal with them, of trying to change our mentality from Power 5, Pac-12. These things matter, like trying to prove that we punch above our weight, to now G5, potentially sort of more of a feeder type, whether maybe it's probably more transfers to P4 schools than going to pros, but you're still getting a mix of both. It's very difficult for someone to just adopt this new mindset, be like, yeah, all right, this is the future. I guess we're just not having as many people drafted out of WSU. So it's difficult. But if your rooting interest is purely with WSU, if you are just a Coug and want to see Cougs be successful, I don't think it changes a whole lot at all.
No, I agree. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And that's a good point that you make, is like, we're different fans now. Like, we've got different things that we have to worry about than what we did, pre Pac-12 breaking up, pre NIL, pre this and
the
that.
Goalposts, the goalposts moved. The goalposts did in fact move, and it's difficult to sort of just reorient yourself to the new goalposts.
Yeah. Well, great conversation. Thank you everyone for tuning in this week. Make sure to comment your thoughts. What are your thoughts on all these topics that we covered today? And be on the lookout for our interviews coming up with Ricky, the GM of Washington State football. Also, the upcoming interview with Johnny Shepard tomorrow and this weekend. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Couch GM. Go check out CougFan.com for all things Cougar athletics. And we'll see you next week. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.
Go Cougs.